Well, I'm back over here in this vast countryside of WA. I've come over to catch up with my old mate Geoff and go on another epic little adventure out through here and go and explore.
G'day, my name's Jamie Hazelden and I've been travelling this great country for many years. And what I want to share with you is the great places that I've been to and the places that you can only imagine of getting to. I want to show you and introduce to you some of the colourful characters, sit round a campfire and reminisce and talk about the journey and the places that we're going to go to. So come along with me as I share this journey with you. Once again, Geoff and I have drove deep into the heart of the Western Australian outback, around about 600 kilometres, and that would be northeast of Geoff's place. Our morning kicked off the right way, nothing like a solid cup of coffee to start the day, and let me tell you, Geoff knows how to make it strong. This one had legs. Once the cup's dry and camp's all packed up, it's time to hit the road. We're heading towards you and me, but not before I top up the tanks with some fuel and explore the little town of Sandstone on the way. And there's plenty of little gems around this little area. For this trip, we're in Geoff's Series 2. Now this is the 1964. And it's a real little gem. It might not look like much on the surface, but trust me, this classic little beauty has seen its fair share of adventure. Now it's a true workhorse. The Land Rover was built to take on whatever the outback throws at it. Packed with character, it's got the rugged charm you can't fake. And there's definitely no air conditioning in this one except the stuff that blows through it. You've only just got enough powerhouse to tackle the rough terrain and long stretches of nothing, all the while driving the lesser driven roads. Well, the suspension on this thing, well, let's just say it's got some. It's a proper landy through and through. As we pulled into Sandstone to fuel up, I could see some old mining equipment that I couldn't wait to go and check out. You know, these little outback towns always have their own stories to tell. Whether it's the local sites, the quirky charm, or just stepping inside some of these shops just to say g'day and hear the stories that go on in there. Or just the people. There's always something interesting lurking around the corner. Now, what I love is you get to these places, like you check out the old slough, the stamping machines, just the stuff that was involved in mining the area for gold, because this is an old gold town. Now the tanks are full, it's time to hit the wide open road to our next destination. Once again, Geoff and I found ourselves deep in conversation, probably talking about the landscape, just how ridiculously flat it is out here. As we drive through the vast expanse of Western Australia, the scenery stretches endlessly. Nothing but wide open spaces, flat horizons and sparse vegetation. The land is harsh yet beautiful, with the occasional spinifex grass scattered, shrubs dotting the desert floor. It's the kind of place that makes you feel both small and very free at the same time. After a few hundred kilometres under our belt, we finally arrived at our camp for the next few nights, ready to settle in and soak in the rugged beauty of the remote corner of the world. Geoff and I are quick to set up camp and just sit back for a few hours before hitting the sack, ready for an early morning start. The mornings are something different out here. The closest person would have to be over 500 kilometres from us. With little room in the fridge, we have out the water cooling in the old canvas bag.
That's a stern brew, that
But
one.
if you know me, my morning will always start with a strong coffee to get going.
Be strong with it? Yeah. You might just want to find a stick to give it a stir. Anyway, good morning, and I thought we'd just give you a bit of an update as to where we are and what we're doing, hey James?
Yeah, why not?
So, yesterday we were heading south of Sandstone, over the last sort of 6 months, I've had quite a few people ask, you know, what do we do on these trips? Because it's not just all about filming, is it, Jamie?
Close, but no.
No, sadly it's not. We just like to take these lovely people along for the ride. And we specialise in remote exploration through a company that I've got. And we specialise in mapping, doing, I guess, survey work, you could say. But we also manage drill programs and do other things. Basically, we head out here with a series of maps, and we've got satellite imagery of the area. We use old survey or topographic maps, and topographic or topography is the lay of the land. With that, our job is basically, with these maps that we've made up, especially for the area, is to find out the access. Are there any tracks in the area? Can we actually get to where we need to go? So we'll use a geology map and the other two types of maps that I mentioned to get us into the area that we want to go. Now, the noble steed that we use to get around in this part of the world, the recon vehicle, is actually the 64-year young Land Rover Series 2, because it's a simple vehicle, as you've seen, Jamie, and you know better than anyone. And it's a vehicle that you can actually fix out here in the middle of nowhere with very, very little. And we're going to take you along today on our typical office day out in the bush, eh, Jamie?
Yep, that sounds like a good plan.
Anyway.
But one thing I would share with them,
yes,
is there isn't tracks. We've got to make our own.
We've either got to weave the Series 2 with its wonderful narrow wheelbase in between the mulga, just as Lembedel did, or we usually get to a point, don't we, and we stop.
Yep.
And then we've got to hoof it on foot. So it's a great way to keep in shape.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And sometimes we'll do a 15k march, but that's when you really find the interesting stuff, don't you, Jamie?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're travelling a bit slower, you're looking around.
And the fascinating part is what you actually do get to see out here, and then you go, wow, you know, there was a base camp here, there was housing here, there was something here, whether it's 50, 100 years ago, but you don't realise it until you find it.
No. Anyway, we'll get on with our day, and we'll all jump on board on the Series 2 and see where we end up.
With a short drive down the road, we're heading to a spot on the map Geoff has marked out on his map as a point of interest. And that's where we'll get started.
Now that, ladies and gentlemen, what you're being held up by is a true selfie stick. Jamie has got a magnetic mount on his action camera that is stuck to a geo pic. I salute you, sir.
Unless we get trapped in here.
Oh, well, that's not so bad either.
No, I don't mind.
I could think worse.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
You know, it's always fascinating when you get into these areas because, I mean, coming up here, we've looked at different rocks and whatnot, but you see there's a few markers around the area where you can see star pickets and stuff where they've marked out a tenement, and that's an area that we are covering. It could be to the south, to the north. We've got certain tenements and there's borders of those tenements, and that's what the markers are. Now what you can see us doing here is Geoff and I, we're chipping away at rocks. So that's to get some samples so we can actually see what sort of rocks we're finding, and then they go back to the lab to be checked. And in this case, you know, we're just looking for any traces that there could be gold or something like that because we're working on their tenement, writing notes, taking some pictures of the areas that we're in. After collecting some samples off the hill here, we could see over in the distance another rocky outcrop. So we jump in the old landy once again and head on over there. This is something I absolutely love. Like, this is base camp right here, and up here we've got some rock formations close to being in absolutely the middle of nowhere at all. Now I've walked through the bush a little bit here, not too much so far, but we've found a few tin cans here and there and all sorts of things like that, and it sort of brings you back to going, I wonder when there was a white fella walking through or checking out the area, because there's a lot of gold in these sort of areas. But what I do love
is getting to this and finding these sort of places, because this is when the real Australian culture comes into play. And you get to places like this, and you just never know what you're going to find, what you're going to see, and to how many people have been through here before. It's always interesting, all the different rocky places you take me to, but what's the significance of this place? Gold, like the rest of them, or what?
Well, we are kind of in the gold fields, so it kind of goes with the name, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But this area is really interesting because in the 1890s, like in Kalgoorlie and Kalgoorlie, they found gold here.
Yeah.
And the name's actually You and Me. That's how the locals say it. And actually a town formed out here.
Wow.
And we found a few bottles over the last few days, haven't we?
A few, just to say the least.
That's right. So that gives you kind of a scale of how many people came out here back in the day.
Do you know the numbers?
I don't, but I would have to say hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah.
And it remained in production from the 1890s right up until 1942. There was a gold mine out here.
And what, the war made?
Possibly that was a big contender out here. Quite a few mines did shut down around that time. A lot of communities actually just disappeared.
Yeah, right.
And didn't rejuvenate or come back again after the war.
Yeah, okay.
So,
but it's a real dry area. There is not a lot of water source.
No.
And like, what about the Aboriginals side of things? Do you know, was there a lot of that out here, or?
I don't know. There's sort of myths and tales about that area.
Yeah.
Side of things of history. There are clay pans out around here. There are the odd rock hole or two.
Yeah.
But we don't have the granites that are really synonymous with the goldfields out here.
Yeah, okay.
Because in the granites, that's where you have the rock holes, the nama holes. They form the clay on the side of the outcrop, the granite.
Yeah.
And that forms the soak, which holds the water when the rock holes have actually evaporated or depleted.
Yeah, yeah.
So we don't have that. So it might have been an area, and I can only say might, that would have been passed through or travelled through to get to more, I guess,
you've only got
more resource.
These outcrops for shelter and shade.
Yep.
It's all low-lying tree coverage,
It is.
And it gets really, really hot.
It does.
And I'm guessing you'd know the explorers. Now, this is a history lesson because he knows all the history of these places, which I love, and the explorers that come through.
Yeah, well, I guess we can go back a bit further in history too, Jamie, if you don't mind, because how did the gold form here? Because that's all a part of why everything that we see here is here today, or part of anyway.
Yeah. And
the whole area is part of a massive fold. So the rock's been folded, it's been broken, it's been sheared, and then we're talking not a few thousand years, we're talking hundreds of millions, billions of years, we've had water basically going through the Earth's surface and then bringing that gold actually to the surface itself.
Okay. Wow.
And then, as I said, in the 1890s, people came out here. There was actually a town out here. But prior to that, there was quite a famous, well-known fellow called John Forrest, and he later became Premier of Western Australia. He then got the title of Lord Forrest, but he started out as a surveyor.
Right.
And he came out here in 1875 to find an explorer from over your way, Jamie, Leichhardt.
Oh yeah.
So he pushed out way into Central Australia. So it's incredible. We're never the first people.
No. But I mean, when you say Leichhardt, he got around, didn't he?
He did. He did. So much so, no one knows where he is. So yeah, but
Crazy.
incredible. But we'll continue on, I guess, Jamie, and find some more interesting stuff.
Yeah. No, it's been another great history lesson. Love it.
Thanks, Jamie.
When you sort of talk about being in a remote area, like I've sort of walked, not right round, but it sort of gives you a full perspective of just when you're actually in the middle of nowhere, just what it actually looks like, we're using GPS coordinates to get into a remote area like this. It's always unbelievable on what you get to see and find in these sort of areas. Blows me away every time. and you never get sick of it. Well, I do anyway.
Hopefully we'll have time to tell you about this place, because we've got a thunderstorm looming, but it's always worth to stop and have a look around, eh?
Absolutely.
So what have you found here, Jamie?
Well, you know, this is what I find incredible here, is you get to go to these places, check them out, because they're abandoned.
They are.
And abandoned for how long, who would know? But, you know, the one thing I love is just rummaging around. You know, don't need to take nothing, but just rummaging around. Well, I can't. I live too far away anyway.
You can only fit so much in carry-on. But no, it's right in what you say. Like, you come to these places. This here was probably, you know, maybe abandoned in the 50s, 60s or 70s. Pretty vague, I know. But looking around the place, it all tells a story, and particularly the file that you've got there tells a great one, I think, Jane.
Well, you don't normally see them worn down that far.
No, is it actually got... Yeah, so all the ribs on the file are actually completely smooth, so it's amazing. But this is one of many sort of out camps that were on these stations back in the day. And, you know, the windmill, which was the vital component of actually running the station here, was critical. And, you know, we are in a desert or arid region, so to actually find water at depth is pretty amazing, I think.
And what you can see is when you're walking around this place is like as far as the eye can see, there's tin scattered around, and that can be from winds, cyclones, whirly winds, whatever's come through here. But at the same time, you can see a torrent of water has come through it here at different stages.
That's it.
That's gone right through the place.
That's right. And so to actually get here, it was a bit of a mission, and we didn't even know it was here. We kind of just got lucky, I guess. But it's amazing because you're out here where we are, and it feels like no one's ever been here before.
Yeah.
We've come across basically a small town.
Yeah.
And it's incredible to think that people...
And I reckon it might be a small town in amongst this, because if we look going back up the track, you know, there's a lot of stuff scattered up through the bushes up through there, which we haven't got to explore yet.
No, we haven't. And that tells another story with the gold rush that was out in this part of the world too, that would have brought, I think, hundreds if not thousands of people out here trying to, you know, better their circumstances. But we better our circumstances, Jamie, because the rain's coming in, we're going to get washed out, and the camera's going to get washed away. So,
Well, I think we found the old rubbish dump here. It was glistening as we were going down the track. All you could see is just glass, and I mean there is a lot of glass here. There's just piles and piles and piles of it everywhere. But this must be where they dumped all their rubbish and whatnot. But you know, just scouting through the whole place and checking it out, and it's always fascinating to imagine or try reminiscing or think about how it was back in the day and all those sorts of things. And I always do, because I think of how something was made or built. You know, this 44-gallon drum, you know, you can see that they've used it as a fireplace, but they've sort of built it inside as well and done all sorts of stuff. And then you look at this, it's not railway track, but you know, it's the old track sort of stuff. See how well used that is. Like, that's just worn right out. And you got like the old lids, which you just don't see anymore. And we've got a number 10 Vegemite jar. Pretty cool. But you got oil cans. You know, like you can tell that they definitely got their use out of their wheels out here. Definitely. Well used. Unbelievable. But no, it's pretty awesome. There's just scrap everywhere. Somebody else's trash is somebody else's treasure. You just never know. But I'll just keep on investigating. This is what I love. Look at that, a Metas stove. I can't take it home, I'd love to. It's a Metas number 6, sitting here in the open, and just check out the condition of it. The doors are gone, yes, I know. But, you know, there's a few bits and pieces still floating around. Gotta love this stuff. I've got to keep exploring though.
With a new day ahead of us and the weather finally clearing, Geoff and I are packed up camp and we're back on the road, heading north. Along the way, we found a few spots with some fascinating history we were keen to check out and share with you. But not before we have to weave our landy through the tight, rugged track.
Not a warm one today, isn't it, Jamie?
It's a scorcher, an absolute scorcher.
So we've just stopped for a minute to let all good vehicles cool down. What a better opportunity to check out this incredible telegraph pole, Jamie.
I think they're amazing. You know, you see them all over the countryside. On the trip over, I saw them on wooden posts and fallen down, rotted out.
Yep.
Wooden pieces off to the side.
Yeah.
With a number of different ceramic tops and things like that. But you know, like we are again in the middle of nowhere.
We are. And what I think is even more fascinating, well, that is fascinating, Jamie, it always is. But what's to add to Jamie's story is the linesman.
Yeah.
Riding along here on a horse, you know, having to fix the faults, getting up and down the poles, you know, that's a bit of a dangerous job, you know, if you slip. But I think what's even more remarkable is how the poles got here in the first place. They almost come in a kit. And basically you've got different sections and they actually slide into one another, and so it means relatively compact. Put them on the side of a camel, bring them in, we've got rock outcrop all around us, don't we, Jamie?
Yeah.
So a bit of gelignite or TNT would have obviously helped to get those poles in a bit quicker than the old pickaxe. But we were talking about the insulators too, weren't we?
Yeah.
Because these are a later type, probably from the 1940s, and as we can see we've actually got a bracket on the top of it there, which mounts in place, and we've got two insulators, so we've got one line going in, one line going out, and the rough orientation of this telegraph line would indicate that it's actually heading up to one of the major regional centres of the area too. So you can always tell a lot more about a telegraph pole when you stop and look at it, Jamie.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I find it fascinating because, like you said, in pieces.
Yeah.
And you can see where it goes into the footing.
Yep.
That's put into the ground. And
That's
then
right.
you can see where the next join is and how it actually slots and slides.
That's right. That's right.
And then, you know, you've got your two nuts and bolts up the top there to slide it on.
That's
clamp it
correct.
up.
Yeah.
But going back to your linesman story, you know, you always hear about the linesman on the railway tracks, on the fence lines. What about the telly? You know, telegraph. You know, it's a.
Maybe there's a book or two in there, Jamie.
I reckon there would be, because I mean, I'm always looking for them when I go up the telly track up far north Queensland, and there's still a lot standing, but they're not right on the track, so people haven't pilfered them. Or bent them or wrecked them.
Well, that's good.
So they're still there, and they look great.
Yeah.
Again, a different construction to these ones. So it's always good to see the different stuff around all this part of this country. It's just amazing.
That's right. Should we go see some other different stuff though?
Absolutely, there's plenty to see here.
There definitely is.
What have we got going on?
Well, we've got some challenging terrain coming up ahead, Jamie. So I am just engaging the locking differential. I know you didn't think that was in this vehicle, did you? But this is actually a McNamara locking differential. And to put it in very, very simple terms, we've got a extra long axle in here with a compression spring. And this bolt basically pulls the axle out of the diff centre. So we've got an open differential when we're on the road. So it's not locked all the time. Now that I've taken it out, I'll put a bung in here. The axle will line up and we'll hear a bit of a fatung as the axle shoots into the diff centre, and then it's locked, so giving us more traction to tackle the terrain ahead.
After Geoff locks in the diffs, we're back at it, trailer in tow, knocking out a few more 100 kilometres. As we roll on, we find ourselves driving alongside this massive stretch of Salt Lake, and running right beside it, a fence, one that makes you wonder just how long it's been here. It's a testament of time, some of this stuff.
You know, it fascinates me. I go all over this country. Doesn't matter where you go, when you're sort of talking across the middle of the country. Now, I'm in WA now. When you're in the Simpson Desert, you're crossing a lot of borders. But the one thing you always see is a salt lake out in those places. And the other thing you see is there's hardly ever any water in them, because it's just a place where it all drains to and then dries out. But what I wanted to touch on is I've got to say I love the post, the fence post. Check that one out. Now that you couldn't get any more bent than this one, but the point I'm getting at is imagine sitting at camp with a hand drill and drilling out every hole. Now back in the day, a lot of that happened where the husband would go out and cut the tree or the branch or whatever it is and bring them back, and the wife would be sitting back at camp drilling the hole. And you can only imagine how tedious that job would have been to do that. And if you look at the gap between, on every fence line like over here, you know, you're only talking about 4 to 5 metres a gap between each post. But the old mulga, she goes a long way, good hard bit of wood. There's a fellow by the name of H.S. Trotman. He was out here, and they, back over that side, they sunk a well to get some water out of it to feed themselves, as in water, the horses, the whole lot like that. And it turned into the likes of a soak. The salt come up, you couldn't drink it, it was horrible, animals died in it, so then they had lack of water again. And that is the trouble when you're out in these sort of places, because you can't go and put a well down. This is a place where there isn't a lot of water, and what you can get, you've got to look after it well, because it's a hard, tedious country we live in. And you can only imagine how it was back in those days. Now, I've got a lot of that information from Geoff, because he reads up on all this stuff and he knows a lot of the history in a lot of the places. And because we're not too far from his place, which is about, you know, close to 500 kilometres down the road, he's read a lot on it. So it's something we could share. Well, it's always interesting when you see a glistening off the side of the road, a lot of broken glass, and then you come and investigate. Now, I only knew that this was an old historic town that used to be here because Geoff told me a little bit about it. Now, I don't know a lot about it, but just to come and have a bit of a wander, see what's here, see the little piles of rubble around the place is always very interesting. You can only imagine what's happened over the time here. And you know, you find the old pot. This one's had its day. The old bucket, well, it's had its day too. But it's always interesting. Now, this one and a couple of others are the only remains to show that there was a town here. And we're talking in the later 1800s. So it is sort of pretty incredible. But you know, this is what I love about coming over to the west and just exploring it that little bit each time I come over. And there's just so much to see and discover, and it's for everybody to go and do the same thing, because there's something for everyone, you know, just to go and check the place out. But I'll keep on looking around this one. Well, what another awesome adventure I've had here with Geoff Lewis from Seriously Series. It's been epic. You know, it's always something to go and have a look at in this great state of WA, because there's so much to it and it's so big, and I cannot wait to get back here again. But we've got to come to an end of another journey this trip. You know, it's nearly the end of the day and we've got a couple hundred Ks to go, and we're on Blacktop shortly. And I just want to say thank you. Hope you enjoyed it and come along for my next adventure. See you soon.